Welcome everybody here to the Regional Services Committee. We have got, just before we start off, we have got a bit of a tight time frame. There's a workshop after this, so I'm really pleased my lightning mover, my deputy, is sitting here, so he'll just nudge me along.
I'll keep you on track.
Yep. So there's a workshop after this for that, so that's the reason. So call for apologies. I've just got one in John Pemberton. Yep. We got a second. That's Morris. All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Any declarations of interest? Public forum petitions, deputations. Confirmation of minutes for the last meeting. Let's have a week. Anyone got some questions around that? Just while you're thinking, I'd say there was a question supplied by Councillor Evans that last meeting, and you're quite happy that that's resolved, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'll move that the minutes be adopted.
Jeremy to second that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Notification of extraordinary items, urgent business. No, we have some questions here. Number 7. These are questions from Councillor Gibson. So can I ask just before we answer these questions, Councillor Gibson isn't a member, he isn't a member of this committee, but we can still, is that still appropriate to take questions? Okay, that's fine. So those questions are there. I do notice in the first question there is a quarterly update on page 44 of the agenda covering off a few of those things. Would you like to make any comment, Lucy, on some of those?
No, the paper's got quite a lot of detail in it in regards to that, and Sarah Yarrow is due to be here as well to speak to the item shortly. So when we get to it,
okay. We can see what that question's about. And also question 2, also by Councillor Gibson, about the number of stock units taken out of Southland, now how that could affect their targets / obligations to meet our climate change targets. Staff are working on this question in verbal in call out facility. That's an ongoing question, isn't it?
Just a point there. I think hall should be spelled H-A-U-L.
Yes. Units, U-N-I.
I got in ahead of Morris.
I'm saying something, Councillor Roy. Yeah,
Unites.
very, very good.
Yeah, your unites, not units too. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that aside, those 2 questions, there is staff are working into. Could I suggest that they be put onto the councillors' questions register at the end?
Yep.
They can just sit there until we've got a conclusion to them.
Absolutely.
So that would be quite good if that's accessible. That's okay with everybody. Okay. Let's go into reports there. 9.1, progress on works in public bodies contracts. So I have, who's going to present this one?
So we're going to have a little multi-pronged approach chat.
Okay.
So Joe should be joining us online. So I've just let her know that we were starting, and Ella is here as well to talk through a couple of her bits. Stephanie was due to be here to talk about the climate resilience work, but there's been a health and safety matter that Stephanie's dealing to, so she may or may not be here. But Paul's also here, so that, for any of the work supervisor questions that the committee might have.
Yeah, that'll be great. So look, who we start off with? Ella, do you want to come up to the front, or just when you're needed?
I might just, would it be helpful if I just set the scene?
You
So just quickly, on the first part of the report talks about our flood resilience programme. So this was money that we were given by the council. Council was given this money by government at the back end of 2024. The 3 projects that have been funded, $6 million in total. One of them's been fully completed in the first construction season, so that was the work down on the Tautau. And so that's the details of all of that are outlined within that first section there. The Oddity projects is the most significant of the three, totals $5 million, and it's spread across 3 years. So there's a map in there to show you how those stages will be rolled. We are currently working through the business case that will be being presented to yourselves with the detailed program delivery plan for that project. And the Tianau project similarly is a smaller value, similar to the Tautau in scale, but due to fire restrictions and a couple of other contractor availability, we've got everything prepped and ready to go, but it hasn't been able to advance as quickly as we would have liked. So that's probably what Steph would have talked about if she was able to be with us. I'll just check that Joe's not in there's no waiting room, is there, Ali? Okay. So Ella was going to just talk a little bit and answer any questions that you might have about the sheep grazing trails. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. You want to talk about what you say about the sheep grazing?
About the sheep grazing elements.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. So I thought maybe this would be of interest to some of you. There's been a lot of discussion about sheep grazing or grazing trials. And so this particular issue is quite specific to land where Environment Southland has stock banks on public property, essentially, or public land. So particularly where the Department of Conservation or LINZ are concerned. I guess the conversations for some time have been about the cost to either us or the other public entities to maintaining those stock banks. And so the various options for how they might be managed differently, and animal grazing has come up several times. This was quite a bespoke kind of approach to just test our criteria to how we might identify what land is potentially able to be used in this way, and just any potential impacts that we hadn't maybe foreseen. So the trial went ahead over 3 weeks, and we found that there weren't any particular issues, although the amount of time that was invested by the farmer in order to do this trial was quite significant. So I guess next steps is to go back and have further conversations with Department of Conservation about how we might better enable this approach into the future.
Any questions? Paul?
I see there's a couple of costs there relating to, was it monitoring? Was that what?
So one of the
looking at the cost breakdowns.
One of the things that we tested was, I guess, the benefit of needing to mulch. So we got tranche 1 funding, climate resilience funding, to mulch the stock banks in this particular area, and half of them have been mulched prior to the trial and half hadn't, which was actually a really good opportunity for us to test the benefit or pros and cons of mulching and or then sheep grazing. We found that mulching still had quite a substantial benefit as opposed to just going in and only grazing. The sheep don't tend to eat down through the tufts of rank grass, and they also track around them. So if they're slightly shorter, we just found that they did a better job at kind of consistently grazing across the area.
Yeah. So on page 31 was the cost breakdown for money spent in the Tianau region. And there's 2 there for monitoring costs for Authority 2019, and it's a cost to the Southland Regional Council. Would that be in relation to that monitoring of the grazing trial? I was sort of discussing with them. No?
No, there was no cost to the monitoring at the stage.
Okay, there was just a couple of costs here, so I just didn't know what they were from.
Yeah. No, sorry, I don't know what it is.
Jeremy's got a question in mind.
Yeah, just have we still, we've obviously done trials, like cut and carry and things up there. Are they still ongoing? They are, they're still in play, those, because we have, as a council, have gone up there and looked at some of those areas. So they're still in play.
Yeah, so they came about through a vegetation management concept plan that was back in 2014. The cut
Is it
and
the
carry.
the river concepts?
Yeah,
Land?
yeah, it's called it's unwanted vegetation concept plan, I think it was.
Yes.
And so the trials there on the Whitestone, the specific ones we're talking about for cut and carry by Barry Taylor, who's been running that, and it's on Lynn's land, so it's right next door to where this trial took place. But this land is Department of Conservation, so the criteria for being able to use that land is slightly different. A big concern to Department of Conservation is public access, and so that's the bit we need to work through with them as to whether they're open to that, and the value of that land to public conservation access.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason that these areas are fenced off is to protect, one of the reasons is to protect water quality. So I want to know whether you've tried to assess the adverse impacts, if any, of grazing stock inside the berm on things such as E. coli or sediment discharges that might be elevated because of this activity, whether or not that is consistent with the rest of our plans to try and improve water quality in the region.
Great question. So I've got a much more substantial report that I'm happy to pass on, which provides a bit more detail about that. So yes, there was monitoring carried out. So the land is anywhere between 100 and 150 metres away from the river, and there's rank grass covering that area between it. The likeliness of of contaminants entering the river is low, so we started with that, whilst also then understanding the need to protect our infrastructure and costs. So we're weighing up those values. The key would be when the water came up higher, either through groundwater or as a flood event, there would be monitoring carried out at that stage. That didn't occur over the 3-week trial, but would be put in place if that happened in a future grazing situation. We looked at other options for how we might measure contaminants, such as using modelling, contaminant modelling overseer, but it wasn't worth it. The tool's not correct for this type of trial, and anything else was, again, unlikely to show any real results. So we certainly considered it. The key was the farm plan that we put in, or the grazing plan that we put in place, and that was ensuring that we'd identified any critical source areas, and that stocking rates were correct and all the rest of it. So we were working with the land sustainability team to do that.
All right, thank you. Sounds okay.
It could be, when I see that and getting the fences off the tops of the banks to the sides of the banks, an opportunity for a startup farmer with a flock of sheep to do specific work for the council, and that to be recognised with a set of practical yards to do the work that they need to do, but someone that can do that sort of stuff. You know, it's a win-win situation for us, because it's a very difficult job, isn't it? We either do that, or problem is there's not a lot of sheep on those properties adjacent to those flood banks anymore.
Yeah.
So we've got to think outside the square on this one. So thanks very much, Ella. We're going to move on if we can. So Joe was
I've got Joe online.
Okay.
Yep.
So Joe's going to talk now to the report.
Joe's going to provide a little bit of extra colour on some of the work that she's been doing in the flood intelligence work programme. So there was quite a bit of commentary in the paper around all of that good work, but I thought it would be helpful for Joe to just run you through a few slides to show you some of the outputs specifically from the bathymetric LiDAR. So Joe, can you hear us? And are you there? And can you?
Kia ora, everyone. I can hear you. Please hear me.
Yes.
Just 1 second while I share screens. If Lucy, you might want to just a couple of minutes, bear with me while I get this.
So we've got, through you, Chair, we've got a press release prepared off the back of this paper in regards to the bathymetric LiDAR to explain, so we'll go out after the meeting today. Council supportive of that. Joe's obviously going to show you some of the outputs from the actual project and talk you through a little bit of the detail about what insights it's giving us and how we might use that in the future.
Very good. Take it away, Joe.
So I just checked that my screen is sharing the right screen. So you should see just the PowerPoint slide of the graphic LiDAR phase 1 trial. That's right,
Yep.
Lucy? Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's not in presentation mode, but it's still, we can see the slide.
Frustrating. Exit. Apologies. So I will just do it in this mode because it doesn't seem to be working for me. So we last year commissioned Waterways Centre, a joint venture between Lincoln University and Canterbury University, to capture bathymetric LiDAR as well as multi-beam sonar and analyse the results. So within that team, there's specialist geomorphologists like Professor James Brassington, who works closely with one of our STAG members, Ian Fuller, and our river engineers as well. So we commenced this with the year, and we project area of the Ariti all the way up to the top of the catchment, the Aparima and New River Estuary. There's two purposes for this work, which I believe is in previous reports to the council around why we're doing it. We are going to use it initially for our flood modelling, but we'll also use this to better understand the system, sedimentation, both aggradation and degradation, with historic surveying data also. So that's the area. There's quite a few phases to the work. The first phase is a trial. That's really to trial the methodology and to understand the environment with what we can capture. So we've completed phase 1 and phase 2. Initially, we reviewed those results and then we commenced with the broader capture of the work. So we have now completed bathymetric LiDAR across all of the project areas. We're currently processing that, and then we'll go back, Waterways will go back to surveyor and boat to sonar and also surveying where we couldn't capture that. So it's been as we expected. The areas that we didn't capture anything were just as we'd expected, which is great. And we were lucky to get some weather windows to complete the work. So yeah, we completed over these 6 areas, trial areas, and tested, the different conditions for the broader capture. So you'll see that unlike a one-line survey river cross section, we get a lot more data than you would traditionally get, and it's now competitive or cheaper to do bathymetric LiDAR than traditional surveying. So we started to see pretty much all the regions in New Zealand are starting to use this technology. Here are some of the returns. So you get more of a 3D picture to the underwater elevation and changes, and this is showing some areas where bathymetric LiDAR was unable to collect any data, and we'll have to infill these also in the coming weeks. So once the capture of data is complete and the surveying data is complete, it'll take about 3 to 4 months to process the data, and then we receive it, validate it, and then LINZ have agreed to share it on their website, so it's publicly accessible to others for their needs also. So that's really, this is the gist of it. These are just the trial areas. Some examples of what you get with this information, and this will be combined with the PGF LiDAR and terrestrial LiDAR to create our elevation model, and that will greatly improve the quality of our flood model for the Ariti and the Aparima. I should also mention that we've got this on the Matoda that was captured after the 2020 flood also. And that's my update, Lisa. Lucy, over to you to finish off on that update.
Thanks, Jo. So your through chair, just the bathymetrics is really helpful for us because it gets through the water. So it gives us this really rich data source that so we can see the beds of the rivers, but also so that we'll be able to use it for our gravel planning and our flood infrastructure plans. Questions for Jo?
Yes, questions there, but Nicol first.
Yes, just I see it wasn't so successful on the Makarewa. Is that because it was discoloured, or I'm just surprised that it was more difficult there?
I can attempt an answer. Jo, my quick answer was, I think from memory, Jo, you'd said that the Makarewa was a bit more disrupted, like the water surface was a bit more disrupted, but if I'm wrong, you jump in and correct me.
I do have Makarewa up here if I can find it, but there's a few different factors. Sediment, suspended sediment, the colour of the bed also impacts the return. So we were expecting that area would be a challenge, and we're confident that the multi-beam will capture enough information in there to give us something that's better than traditional cross sections.
Questions? No further questions? Oh, Jeremy, and then
You might just have to educate me. What's a bed return?
A bed return. So that again, Jo will jump in and tidy up after me. So the way that the bathymetric LiDAR works is similar to traditional LiDAR, except it's mounted on helicopters, so it flies a lot lower. So the return is how it bounces down, hits the bed, and then up.
Part of the process.
Part of the
rather than
process.
Part of the formation.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was trying to work out.
next, Jeremy Morris.
So how can this be incorporated with the LiDAR that we already have? The current LiDAR maps of the land surface outside of rivers is very useful. You can see slopes and all of that. But so this tells us how deep the bed is and where there might be accumulations of subsurface material, not gravel above the surface, because we can see that on the other LiDAR. So this is just subsurface information. So
yeah, correct. So it layers on top of the terrestrial PTF LiDAR and provides us with additional detail of what we can't see with the PGF LiDAR, which is that below the water surface.
Is that done along the river channel, or are these cross sections just at specific places?
So they're flown the whole length of the river off with these smaller helicopters, which means they fly a lot lower than what the planes do when they do the terrestrial LiDAR. And it also means that because they're flying that bit lower, they can get under. The helicopters don't go under bridges, but the beams go under bridges. So you can get, that's why you get good coverage of that aggradation happening around the bridge pillars as well. So yeah, it's a fairly new thing.
Linda.
Yeah, just assuming that the availability of this data will be also through the dish work that Great South is doing, is that correct?
Great question. So in time, potentially, yes, we would be making it publicly available through LINS, as Jo's alluded to. It's quite a hefty piece of data. I haven't been as close to the dish process that Great South are running as some of my colleagues, but the intention would be that we certainly are able to link it to what they're doing, but it's going to sit on the LINS website.
Yeah, so the link would be to the LINS website.
Yes, and so similar
makes
to
sense.
Councillor Rodway's question about the terrestrial LiDAR, that's where the PGF LiDAR is sitting at the moment, facing portal that's on the LINS website.
Yeah. Great.
Well, that's very good. You're quite happy there, Lucy?
Yes, so the only other thing, Chair, I would just point, so obviously there's a lot of other detail in this report, and the catchment maintenance work programme highlights all of the efforts the team have been doing over the last quarter in terms of BAU work programme, and yeah, just to kind of point to just how much is happening, substantial kind of movements of rock, and obviously lots of drainage work happening, so the breakdown there in terms of catchment by catchment, and Paul and Dave are here if councillors have got any specific questions about any of that page, those few pages, or the contract part at the back.
Very good. Is there any questions specifically to Dave and Paul on that? You want to come up, guys? We've got a couple of questions. Maris first, and then Jeremy, and then Paul.
Same one that I had for Ella.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, there was one other question that I meant to ask Ella that I forgot at the time.
Go for it.
Was considering, even though what you're doing looks like it's not having too much, or the potential for adverse effects is not very high, have you considered planting those areas, since they're a long way from the river, in trees? Like this has been done in other places, like in the Arete at Sobek, for example, where the poplar trees have been planted, and they were planted there so that they would suppress the Dawson brood, so you didn't have to spray it. The same thing. So, are you considering planting areas like that in other areas, such as where instead of doing the grazing trial?
So, Polly's just as well placed, if not better than me. I guess just to be clear, it is in the floodway. The aim for the floodway is to keep that area clear to ensure that there's enough carrying capacity for flooding. The stop banks themselves, obviously we don't want planting anywhere on or near those, so those will always need to be maintained, vegetation maintained in some way. We are, in this particular site, removing a lot of pest weeds, large trees, because of the impact that they hang on carrying capacity. Whether or not there's an alternative to infill that area will be something that Paul will be able to answer much better than me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd probably be wanting some reassurance that planting an area like the berms out on the White Sand with flood banks adjacent, it wasn't going to compromise the flood carrying capacity of that section of the river. It's a bit different. So maybe we don't have flood banks. We're really careful about where you do carry out plantings and stuff like that. You know, willows, for argument's sake, do have quite an influence on general capacity in other locations around the province. Something that we need to work through.
All right, thank you. That leads on to my other question about on page 15, where you talked about South Hill End on the Upper Emu. Well, my question really relates to that as well, because we have a Slow the Flow project going in the Mataura. And Slow the Flow relies on increasing the resistance of objects in the channel to slow the water down, to reduce the flood peak. But if here we're removing 30 hectares of willows, and it says that's to improve the channel's hydraulic efficiency. This term hydraulic efficiency is used in quite a few places. That seems to me to be to the antithesis of slow the flow, and that I'm worried that if you increase the hydraulic efficiency, what happens is that the water goes down the river faster and you end up with a higher peak, which might damage properties further downstream. And that seems to be inconsistent with what we're doing elsewhere. And I realise are a problem, but I'm still a little bit troubled about this whole idea of improving the channel hydraulic efficiency when we're also trying to do slow the flow.
Who would want to have first go at that?
First crack, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague, Chair. So just to be really clear around the Slow the Flow project, the Mirihiku Slow the Flow project that we're working on, there are 5 different nature-based solutions that we're looking at. None of them involve slowing the flow of water within the floodplain. It's really important that we fully understand the effects of that before we were going to go on to do that, and so that's not what we were proposing. There are 3 of the nature-based solutions are up in the very top of the catchment, so tussock land, forested land and wetlands are above the 300-metre contour line, so that's up the top of the catchment. In the middle of the catchment, you've got the likes of the detention bunds, again, not necessarily backing any water up. They would be collecting some of that water and holding it back for a short amount of time. The reinstating floodplains would be enabling a greater width or capacity for the floodplain to deal with floodwaters, but it's not necessarily about holding it up or backing it up, because again, I guess the effects of that would need to be worked through in a very site-specific situation. So the vegetation in floodways, I'll leave back to my colleagues.
Through you, Mr Chair, since the flood banks were built in the late 80s, early 90s, those willows have got 30 years growth on them, and now at the point where you're reducing that initial carrying capacity that was designed into those schemes back in that period. So yeah, that's the reason why we're proposing to remove those areas of willows, just to restore the capacity back to what it would have been when the banks were fresh and minty, I guess I would say.
Very good. Anything to add, Dave?
Yeah, just to add, there's some stuff come out that we've got from the levy situation in the States that shows we've got to be extremely careful when we slow the flow. In fact, it's worked in reverse. I've tried it, meandered it and everything, and it's actually changed the whole floodplain and ended up flooding the city from the top end. So I would suggest that any slow the flow around the towns, above the towns, has to be modelled and really looked at properly before we actually. Yeah.
So talking a mixture of responses, which seems the way forward. I will just question from Jeremy then Paul.
Just in regards to the catchment maintenance work program, are we on target to do everything we did set out for budget? Obviously, there's a little bit of discussion about not getting things done. Are you fulfilling your job, or fulfilling the work that needs to be done? We're going to be able to spend the money that's been budgeted.
Yeah, well, through you, Mr Chair, most of the programs in the various trading districts are on track this year. Really, for argument's sake, is underspent this year, but we were overspent in previous years due to flood damage. Neckery was a bit overspent this year, just solely due to the fact that we're trying to get on. Neckery was hit quite hard by the floods in September last year, so we've had to swings and roundabouts. We've had to respond to that sort of thing. So, yeah, generally speaking, I'd say we're on track.
Thank you, Jed. Just looking through the costs there, and it was earlier said, and it's not the biggest costs here, it's just a couple of those monitoring costs for authority. Are we charging back monitoring costs on consented operation?
That's correct.
That's correct. And also the spraying in the Mararoa, outside of the Mararoa, has been pretty good this year, but looking at the inside the river channels going to be another challenging one as we get into spring, what I'm seeing at the moment. So looking back to what Councillor Pemberton asked in the previous meeting around the Mararoa, we're going to have some challenges there, I would suggest.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair, I'm sure everyone's aware of the issues that we had up in the basin with the funding in the committee.
Yeah.
There's a committee thing, so that still hasn't been resolved at this point.
Okay, thank you.
That's pretty good.
I apologise, Mr Chairman, may I ask one other question?
Sure you go, but we'll make that the last. We're on a bit of a time.
Yeah, no, this is important stuff. There's a reference to NIWA's literature review on nature-based flood solutions, which I downloaded and read, and it was very interesting. It said that there are, for medium-sized floods and smaller floods, a lot of these solutions that you were talking about before, about building wetlands and detention ponds and that sort of thing, can be useful, but for very large floods, these have limited benefit. So it seems to me that while a lot of this work will help with moderate events, but with very large events, there's still going to be a problem. And I wonder if in the organisations thinking about this, when or if or are we looking at the consequences of this, which means really that you're going to have to move people out of the way rather than rely on stop banks and even slow the flow, which won't be effective in very big flood events. So are we, and when will we be looking at, I know we presented data to the Gore District Council, and we showed them there that on the main street of Gore, if we have a very big flood, it's going to be underwater by a metre. And, I think that we really need to be pushing this a bit more so that people don't think that if we clear the willows out of the river or we build detention bunds in the headwaters, that people are going to be safe because they are.
Now, that's a pretty big question, isn't it?
It's very,
Lucy might answer, but I'm sure we're going to have
You
to
don't answer that.
approach this in a really responsible way,
Mm.
because what you've highlighted is some really consequential type of questions, isn't it? So just opening up for Lucy.
Yeah, so big question and an important one. I think I'd just point to a lot of what we've been talking about in this item is how things are right now. That's the multi-pronged approach to dealing with a complex set of problems. And what we're moving towards is a catchment by catchment integrated approach. So a lot of the work that's been happening on the Matoda, and to your example about the core work, so that model and all of that information that Jo and the team around her have built to enable us to see what the risk is will enable infrastructure decisions to be made for those big events. And the work that Ella and the team have been doing in the north of the Matola will give us more of a kitty of tools to be able to turn to think about the small to medium ones. The intention is always to kind of take the sting out of the tail. So you want to level it off where you can across those scales of small, medium and large events. So we're moving to an integrated way of managing our catchments from the mountains to the sea, but we also are managing within what we've got right now too. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's a process. And I think the boys have, Paul and Dave have mentioned how, the good work that's being done under a BAU space. Ella's given the indication of what's coming more of, but we do really have to start shifting our thinking to more tools, and some of those, as you've mentioned, will be talking to the community about where they should be or could be and where they might need to move to. So it needs to be part of the conversation, and certainly with the intentional work that's happening in Matola, that will be part of the conversation. Is where do we need to be moving forward? And the main purpose for the recent release for the Matola work was to inform Gore's district plan process. So that's going to inform their district planning around where they could or should enable more development. So again, multi-pronged approach.
Well, that's very good. I think we'll finish up at that. But I just want to thank you very much for the presenters of this report. And Jo, your work, I guess, it highlights it's a large part of this whole block of work. And Morris, your question just highlighted the importance of this work. And we're going to build some communication primarily around this work. That's very good. I think we should highlight too the catchment team and the work that they've been doing and how busy they are too. So let's make it an all-round communication too if we can. So look, I want to thank everyone there, and so we need to resolve this report. Who will move that for us? We'll receive this report. Thanks, Eric. And Nicole to second that. All in favour? Yes, that's carried. Thank you very much. So we go on to 9.2, biosecurity and biodiversity at Polly. Quarter 3 report. Thank you.
I suspect that might be rat rather than a rat catch. That was many big records on students.
So we'll just run through this quickly for you. I put a little report together with, I guess, what I think are the highlights of the report. So now that I've got technology sorted. Thank you, Brittany. it's going to be a bit slow with this technology. So the Pest Plants team have done some Vomeria in the Te Anau inspections. So we have some hotspots for Vomeria in Bluff and in Maui and out on Rakiora. And while we fully don't understand their extent, it is responding well to control. So we're still figuring out exactly how it's getting where it's getting. But the team seem to have a good control system working so far. The Sue and Simon Marwick in the other picture have been undertaking Contona Easter and Darwin's Barberry inspections through Te Anau. So this is a follow-up to the Jobs for Nature project that we did. So we rolled out a huge team of people to go and do a massive amount of control. And now Sue and Simon have been working for us doing follow-up inspections. And they've been very pleased that they only found a small number of seedlings during that process. Our eradication program, been pleased to say that the only site of field horsetail in Southland still remains as having no regrowth, so we're really pleased with that. Boxthorn is only at one site and this is being controlled by DOC, so that seems to be working well. And purple loose strife, the control is being successful, but as the team do more and more communications, we find more of these in people's gardens. So if you're out looking, we've talked a bit about Old Man's Beard and we talked a bit in the previous reports and meetings about the site we found in Tuatapere. So I thought you'd like to see some photos of our team out there actually working on it. So contrary to reports about the number of vehicles out there, we were actually doing work. It was a good number of us. This is biocontrol, so this is just a bit of an update. You can see in February 2022, this is the same paddock from the same photo point. So the picture on the left is the one that looked like in February 2022, and then after the ragwort beetle did its thing, that's what it looks like in February 2025. So there'll always be a level of management. You can see there's still some few ragwort plants in the background, and this will go in ebbs and flows, but it actually shows just how successful these things can be. Unfortunately, green thistle beetle, that's in its second year here, but it isn't showing that it's being as successful in Southland as it is in other places. I thought the ragwort one is a pretty good demonstration of what we get up to. Wildlings, everybody's favourite topic, just letting you know that we've had some spray trials in Te Katimu. Mid-Dome, there was volunteer day with corporates out Mid-Dome, which was very successful. And the process that Doc and Lynn's run is that towards the end of the financial year, if there's any underspends across other projects, they can reallocate that money, and we were successful in getting some of that reallocated funding, and Jolie and the team have done a good job getting that spent on controlling wildlings in our area. Pest animals, we continue to get quite a number of inquiries. The organisms of interest always increase. These are always the interesting calls that the team get. So this last quarter we didn't get a call about a snake neck turtle. It's supposed to say snake neck turtle, but we did observe one being sold or being rehomed online, so we kept an eye on that because you're allowed to have them as pets, but we don't want them getting loose. Dave's team have received calls about cockroaches, ducks, and wasps that are on the increase. And again, these are ones where people think that we might come out and do control for them, but unfortunately, it's to provide them advice on how to do that control themselves. The possum control areas program has been very busy, so the blue circles on this map are the areas that we did maintenance on in Q3, so keep in mind we're 2/3 of the way through Q4 now, so that map will be looking quite different now. And we've had some new sites. So we had the possum press, we worked with the communications team and managed to get a possum press out that's going out with the maintenance letters to help increase in education. And the picture on the bottom of the bales is possum damage. So it's one of the reasons that this work's really important to farmers and landowners, because that's not great if they've got too many possums and everything in balage open. We've had a couple of new PCAs, possum control areas started up and had their initial controls done. So one at Struan Flat and one at Willanda Downs. Both of those were XTB areas, and the performance monitor for the Struan Flat one has come in at less than 2%. residual trap catch result. So that's pretty good. The limit is 5%, so that's pleasing. And a third PCA is being set up, so that will be underway, and the initial control will be sometime this winter. So just as a reminder and a thought, the current possum control area program now covers over 420,000 hectares of Southland land. So it's a large program. And the program includes all this possum monitoring. So like I mentioned before, we did the one residual trap catch performance monitor on the new PCA, and there's been 5 other monitorings done. There's been 2 wax tag indicators with community groups, so that's the way that we support our community groups to understand what they're doing as well. And Caitlin has managed to get us a new possum monitoring contractor, so that's an area that we always have had difficulty in the past, just getting people to want to take on doing that monitoring work for us. You can see in these pictures, maybe you can't see them, but there are traps in this one. Oh, my mouse doesn't show on there. Oh yeah, so there's a trap there and a trap there, and there's a sleeping possum further down here. That probably won't get up again later on. We'll say he's sleeping for now. The animal pest team have also been working on our exclusion animals. So these are the animals that aren't established here yet and that we are trying to keep out from coming here. So these include wallabies. We had 2 reportings of wallabies. These are reported through the MPI portal, and that works really well. So as soon as someone puts something into there, even if it's in the weekend, it sends a notification through to our staff, and they can act on that straight away. And one was found to be possums sign, and the other one we haven't been able to confirm that Lake Ellabast. And there was a rook sighting in Riverton, but there's been no further reports of that, and we weren't able to confirm what that was. Predator-free Rakiura, so Rebecca and Dave have been supporting this program, and this is just a brief update that there's been a lot of community events happening, so I think you'll get a more detailed report coming up later. Marine biosecurity. We've worked on an MOU and Health and Safety Charter for Fiordland Marine Biosecurity Partnership. We contracted Southland Land and Water Planning to progress the Pathways Plan update, and the team have been providing technical advice on biosecurity moorings and anchorages to support the coastal plan review. And there was a senior leadership meeting to discuss the change of direction to the Fiordland Area Control Program. So the Fiordland Area Control Program has been just progressive containment, and that was determined to no longer be feasible. So the change of direction is now operational. So that change was that we've ceased large-scale area biomass control, but we are continuing to do area biomass control in small areas where we know we can clear that out and hopefully prevent it from getting further out. This has released some of our resources to increase surveillance on the high-risk things of mooring structures and key anchorages, and we've increased surveillance throughout the wider fjords to identify and control new range expansions quickly, because the findings of the work we've done has found that when we find them quickly, we can deal with them. The Marine Pest Surveillance Program continues, so we've done some work in Fiordland wide using the MB Pembroke and the GB Southern Winds in partnership with others. There's been area management in Easy Harbour at Rakiura. Vessels, moorings and structures in the northern Rakiura were inspected, and vessels and wharf inspections in Riverton. Some high-risk sites and Catlins were inspected, and a contract extension for Fiordland-bound vessels inspections, so we were able to do more inspections of those vessels heading into Fiordland, and additional area management in Easy Harbour. So the program does cover a lot more than Fiordland, but we do focus a lot on Fiordland. And then the biodiversity team have been busy signing off Environmental Enhancement Fund grants with people. We've been doing all sorts of projects with them. There's some more of those projects. We also celebrated World Wetlands Day at the Pinckney Farm. And, you know, in true form, it rained for World Wetland Day, but everybody attending was not faced by being wet on a wetland day. So that was a good event. We've been supporting our biodiversity focused community groups with a range of advice and assistance. The biodiversity team also do general inquiries. We get a lot of information about grants. So once our grant was fully allocated, we get a lot more people wanting grants. Wetland planting, we've done some work on determining some good native species for amenity planting and giving that advice out. Fencing advice, appropriate species lists. So we've been working internally and with others on that. Katrina did some work with bats. Someone reported thought they had some bats in their roof, and so she went out to check that. Found they weren't bats, but she didn't tell me what they were. And we've been working with bird species info for the communications team. The Biodiversity Forum met, and actually they meet again this afternoon. At our last meeting for the forum, we had Scott Jarvie from Otago Regional Council came down. Scott's been leading some Enviro link grants through the National Biodiversity Working Group, SIG, and he's been including a lot of Southland work in that. So he's done a lot of work on species lists for us across a variety of species. But he was taking us through the process that they've been doing in Otago around regional conservation status assessments, which is work that we yet to start in Southland. So it was quite really interesting getting to hear how their process worked and how they're doing that. So that's future work on the radar for us, I guess. And then we look after the covenants at the Lower Mataa, and so there's we've had staff out rebaiting bait stations, and we've had traps serviced in that area. Also in Q3 we did some additional plantings out there as well. Yeah, that's nice. Those are the highlights.
As always, it's a very comprehensive report, Polly. Thanks very much for that. We've got a couple of questions lined up for us from Eric, and then we've got Paul.
Yeah, thank you for your report. Look, on the top of page 37, where you're talking about wilding pine control, there's also mention of Douglas fir. My question is around what advice is given to people doing forestry, and we've always said right tree, right place, and if you look around Queenstown, you see that Douglas fir is probably worse than contorta. It's certainly a very profuse cedar, and certainly more windborne in terms of seed than anything else. You go to Pukaki and look at around Tekapo, the larches that are there as well. So I'm just concerned that there is activity and planting taking place where it's not the right tree in the right place. And what are we doing about that?
I could just, what Craig said, and that probably address, there is, I'd just like to say there's a meeting taking place in North and South next week, specifically on the spread of Douglas fir outside of commercial forestry.
Right, cool.
So, but Karen, Craig?
Chair, I invited Craig to come up because it's actually his team who look after our forestry advice, so I think he's better placed to answer that than I am.
Maybe, yeah, well, definitely very conscious of the Douglas fir being a best weed. So when they come in and they'll give us what's called a guide on the rating for how the risk is, and we look at that. So predominantly what we're after is really what they are doing. If it does go ahead and gets past biosecurity, biodiversity, therefore then what sort of mitigations they're going to put in place for the on control of the wilding pine risk from the Douglas fir. So what measures they got in place, and if that's the case, then it's usually predominantly goes through consent, and consent still need to consent to plant it.
Yeah, so question from Paul and then Nicola.
Yeah, question, and probably just a huge thank you to the Marlins and the Te Anau community. The inspections, I've had a lot of locals commenting how really polite and good they are checking for pest plants. But the Tuatapie Old Man's Bed situation, we know of that one site. Is there going to be something like the Marwicks that go around and try and find any others, any other sites of that? Because no doubt if there's a big site like there is in Tuatapere, the likelihood is there's more there. We've just got to, and there's a lot of nooks and crannies for that to hide in. And I'm quite not heartened, but there's just as many moose sightings as there are wallaby sightings in the last month, too. You know, it seems a bit of a shocker. You know, more moose sightings than bats. But also cats are an issue, and I've raised this a few times, and it doesn't come up in this. And just around Mavora, and I've notified Department of Conservation that there was a cat eating rubbish out of caravan bags and everything. So got good photos of it. There's one. Can't wait until there's two and then more. So, but notified Department of Conservation and they sort of said, yeah, we know it's there. But with the old man's beard in Tuatapere, are we going to have a program after what you're doing to look for it if it's encroached anywhere else?
Through you, Chair. The team are using lots of methods to try and find old man's beard. So they've just recently done a drone trial, and we found that the site that we found was actually bigger than we had thought. So we were able to put a drone over it. We had previously had success with drones, but someone had a different type of drone, so we've used the drone. We've been working with the catchment team to get into the helicopters when they're doing the river survey. So we've done that, been able to coordinate with them once and do that and find various weeds, and also doing boat surveys. But at this stage, we don't have a program of work just specifically to look for that, but the team are actively surveying for multiple weeds, and we realise that.
I understand. I think
so we're using as many techniques as we can.
I think I sort of said I suspected something upstream of the Boundary Creek Bridge at King Street.
Yeah.
So just to check that on the true left, I suppose, just above. I just suspected there was something in there that's of concern.
And in relation to your other questions, please, we don't have to deal with the moose.
Yeah.
And yeah, only thing I can say is keep letting DOC know that they have a cat issue. We are in the process of starting to do the cost benefit analysis for all of the pests in the regional pest management plan. And that's due 2029. So we might touch on cats again. It wasn't so successful last time, but we might try that again. I don't know. But we are working with that.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thanks very much. Nicole and then Jeremy.
If one particularly one of them does from the Old Man's Beard. Quarter two is not a term I'm familiar with, and I'm assuming it's in the bush behind the domain, either above or alongside. Is
Bridge Street.
Oh, right, it's quarter, yeah. So I'm just, yeah, quarter
I think-
two is not an area I'm familiar with.
Oh, in the report.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So quarter two refers to the financial year. So we're reporting on quarter three for you now, but we're referencing that in quarter two we also found something, but we've expanded it in quarter three.
Then the green thistle beetle, it wasn't where we had one released in Southland. Do they eat Californian thistles?
Sorry, I'm not 100% sure on those now, but our plants team aren't here, but it's part of a national trial. And it's its second year here. So it's being monitored to see how well it will go here, the green thistle beetle.
Good questions. Jeremy,
Yeah, just
Lyndall.
quite impressive, the report photo. But yeah, I'll take it the beetle, was it? Was it a beetle?
Yeah, flea beetle.
Flea beetle. I just had to look up and make sure I got the right.
It was a flea beetle and a cinnabar moth.
Yeah, so what now? Where do they go? When once they've had a good clean out, breed up well, do they just self-decrease? Obviously, if there's no, and there's the odd plant that they live off, but do they just die? Obviously, well, we've done the research, they won't eat half the vegetation around south, but that's what they do, they just consume. If they don't reach another plant, they
So through you,
depopulate?
their population size will reduce to the available habitat and they'll remain at a size. And then as it regrows, they will regrow. So they don't completely die off. And if they did, we have other locations where we can reintroduce them from, but they shouldn't completely die off. Their
So there's
population
a-
will just reach a carrying capacity for what's available habitat and then regrow again when they get more habitat back. So
Well, do they have quite an area that they can move? Do they fly? I'm just asking. Moth?
getting outside. We're
Okay,
not
no,
expertise, so-
We can come back to it. It's quite, it was
Yeah.
pretty impressive.
It's always
anyway.
us.
Yeah, we need to find out more about that, I think. Lyndall.
Yeah, just really quickly, Chairman, thank you. I'll pick the hardest one to say. Fish Passage Remediation Project.
Yes. This is one I can answer questions on. This is
My
mine.
question really is,
Sorry.
when will we stop this? So I don't have to say it anymore.
That's right. now.
So congratulations on being ahead of schedule, for a start, but, just wondering when you say the case study final report is due, is that final or just for the year?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. The case study is a part of the PhD, so that study will be finished.
Oh, okay, I see.
And the reason we did a case study is because the techniques that we've been using are considered novel to the national standards, and so we've been trying to demonstrate, we needed to study them. That was part of the deal of using a novel solution, and we were hoping that that would show that they were effective and then they would no longer be novel. So when that case study is finished, we'll be passing it on to NIWA for their consideration. And we had expected they would be successful for climbing species, and that's what we've found. So that's good. We have at least an option for climbing species because there's very few remediation options for culverts, for small size culverts. The Fish Passage remediation project that we run through Jobs for Nature will be finishing on the 30th of June.
Nice.
But we've put 259 remediations out there that will require ongoing monitoring. So the biodiversity team will continue to monitor those over the coming years. So we don't know how long they will last, their longevity will be. So we'll be monitoring those to maintain that information, make sure they're not damaging the structures they're in, making sure they're not degraded. And then as the council works through the national policy statements for fresh water, there's a requirement to have an action plan. So when we've developed that, we will continue to do some fish work. But we'll come up with a better name, I think. That's what I'm struggling to say it too.
Yeah, it's really hard to say.
That's very good.
Thank you.
We're getting a bit crushed up for time, so I'll just keep moving. But I just want to thank you very much, Polly. And could I suggest too, this meeting in Northern Southland next week, with Jolie's going up. We administer the trust here. I've seen some images already. It's quite disturbing that the spread of that Douglas fir. That maybe you come back to this committee or to the wider council with an item around that. I think it'd be really beneficial to understand that threat. So thanks very much. Very comprehensive. Craig, you're in the hot seat. So just before that, we're going to pass that. So
Recommendation.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Someone to second that. That's Jeremy. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you very much. So we've got the Catchment Integration Divisional update.
Yeah, hey, off the time, we could give them a brief update or go to questions.
Minus 4 minutes.
So we've sort of taken that as read, are we, Craig?
Yep.
Report. Yep. So anything coming in out of that? Councillors? Quite happy?
Yes, it's got things, catchment improvement fund, winter grazing, catchment ground, winter grazing, drive rounds, and there's the education component in there.
Okay, we've got one question there.
Yeah, just the contaminated land site work. When is that likely to be concluded?
They should have that. I know they're actually working in Little Tahiti at the moment. Over in Milford. Sounds like it's going to schedule. That's why
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. second to that?
Yep.
Lyndall, all those in favour? Aye against, that's carried. Thank you very much, Craig.
That's one, thank you.
We'll move on to, oh yes, 9.4, Whakamana Te Watuna quarterly update. So Lucy's going to do this with Sarah. Is she online?
Some help from the back.
Oh, there we go.
So through you, Chair, Sarah and Kane are both here from the Trust. So following on from our last Regional Services Committee meeting where there was complimentary things said about the report we tabled as a level of detail, we invited Sarah and Kane along to talk to their report in case the council had specific questions for them they wanted to hear from.
I do remember that was quite an impressive report, just searching back in my memory.
Indeed. So this is a Q3 update and just keen to make sure that councillors are getting what they need in terms of reporting from the Trust. And if this, given that we're under a little bit of time pinch, we can always invite the fine folk from the Trust back to another time for a more deep dive if that goes.
We are under time, but I'd like to comment on that report. Any hot things you would like us to highlight, that you'd like to highlight for us? And then we'll get into a couple of questions.
Firstly, I'll just say kia ora tātou, so I'm Sarah and I've joined the Whakamana Te Watuna Trust. Moved to Invercargill in January by way of Auckland and Nelson, so I think I'm heading in the right direction. And it's great to be here, and so now you can put a face to the name, and so you know who we are as the team, and we work with our trustees. So hi.
Hello.
The main talking.
So I guess the partnership's been pretty busy. We've been doing a lot of work, I suppose, around restoration work on some of the parcels of land that were initially purchased by the wider partnership, and what we're going to do with those. So we've got some good plans in place for that. We've started plant procurement, weed control, landowner engagement. So that's been moving along really well. We've been doing quite a bit of work on sort of nature credits. We've completed phase 1 of that project and are now moving into phase 2, which is that more detailed planning, choosing a standard, looking at what sort of income we can actually earn off that, what are the mechanics, stakeholder engagement, all those sort of things there. And then probably the big thing that if we look forward to Q4, we're doing a Year 9 work plan. So what does the next year look like for the partnership, the trust? And some of the big things in there, we've still got some certain parcels of land that would be great to acquire for the wider work we're doing around contaminant intervention. Looking at additional funding. How do we bring additional funding into the partnership from outside the core partners so that we can actually continue to do the mahi. And also looking at, we've got quite a few bits of land. How do we actually do our weed control in a really efficient manner as well? So that's just a couple of things there. Probably the only other thing that might be of interest is a Jordan Creek sediment trap that we put in nearly 2 years ago. In some areas of that, we've got nearly 2 metres of sediment. So that's working really well. I mean, I guess that's both a pro and a con, I suppose. And also we've got our on-farm fund as well. So we had 100K in that this year, and we'll have another 100K next financial year. So that's for on-farm projects or catch and group projects. One of those is we've just done all the planting, and we've got another couple of landowners who are interested in that as well. So it's a really brief update.
Thanks very much. Lucy, you'd like to comment?
Very quickly, Chair, just from an operational perspective to be aware of, Ella has graciously accepted the new role on the project support group. So we've got a PSG that supports the trust, and obviously Nicholas is the key co-chair for us, but Ella stepped into the breach and to provide some consistency moving forward and to join up some of the thinking that we've been talking about already this afternoon in regards to our other programs of work. So from an internal perspective, Ella will be our key point of contact for the trust moving forwards.
Very good, thanks for that, Michelle. We've got Eric, and then we've got Paul for a question, and then Morris.
Thank you, Chair. My question's partially been answered, which was the efficacy of the sediment trap. So one's now presuming that in a short time it's going to be full with particulate. So my question now is, what happens then? It needs to be physically dug out, and have you costed a sort of maintenance program on that? And is a resource consent required what you actually do with the particulate that you take out of there?
Yes, that was all part, we had to get a resource consent to obviously install that sediment trap, so that was all part of that consent, was cleaning it out, and we did think reasonably carefully about that at the start in terms of how we designed it so we could have digger access and that sort of thing. So the cost, it's a pilot, so we don't know. That's part of what this is going to tell us. So that will be interesting. Where the stuff goes, the farmer's very keen to have it back on his land. It's actually got some good nutrients and that in it. So we've done a lot of work with Martin Van Rossum, who's the landowner, who's where the sediment trap is. So we will spread it back out on the paddock.
Okay, thank you. Paul. Just a question around the neighbours, the habits. Has there been changing of habits with neighbours around you that is improving? Is it an improving thing, you think?
Yeah, I think, if you take farming in general, I think we've seen, significant, improvements in practices when you look at winter grazing and, upgrades to irrigation, to effluent systems and just general good farming practice. So that is certainly, has been happening. Probably, one of our key, objectives is around, that reduction of contaminants getting down to the lagoon. So one of the branches of that is on-farm mitigation. So, we're looking at how can we, speed that up a bit. And, we've got some sort of catchment scale interventions, but that on-farm part is still really important. And that's part of that 100K sort of fund, is to try and fast track some of those improvements that farmers may want to do on, your individual land, so to speak.
That's good, because I can imagine the relationship between you and your neighbours needs to be really good for it to progress in a positive manner forward. And in such a pinch point as we've got there, it would be really good to see some proactive.
I think the trust having the ability to have that we fund and I think that is really helping to build and rebuild some of the relationships. So it's a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Most.
Yes, about that trap. Is it actually on the Jordan stream itself? Is it in the stream itself, or is it on the side of it?
On the side.
So sediment from high flows is diverted into there. Is that the plan?
Basically, no, all the flow goes through there, and in high flows, the vast majority goes through there, unless you have like a really big flow, and then it goes back down the old channel part of the flow. So most of the time, and in most flows, it's fully through that sediment trap.
Oh, okay.
So it still works the other way around.
But no, that sounds good. Is that something that people could do on their properties easily, or is it a bit expensive for that?
At that scale, it's quite expensive because that's set up for a pretty big catchment. But certainly the idea is that at a smaller scale you could replicate that, and that's sort of part of what we're trying to learn, so that Environment Southland, Fonterra, the other partners can pick up some of those learnings and obviously roll them out.
And then working with Lucy and Haley on what do those consenting requirements look like, and how do we make that easier as well. I think is a big part of it. Really take this up. So.
The other question, Mr. Chairman, was about the planting out of the Webster block. What sort of cost per hectare are we looking at doing this over the time? I know, cost per hectare at Stirling Native Forest is pretty high, over $20,000 a hectare. Is that the sort of cost?
Yeah, so with our Nature Credits project, we did quite a bit of financial modelling, and so counted up the numbers, and we've estimated it's about $7,500 per hectare over the whole life. So if we were looking at how we get biodiversity uplift over 25 plus years if we want to go into a nature credit scheme. So 7,500 a hectare. But our aim is to, we want it to be as efficient, cheap as possible to really get people who want to do it. So, but you're not wrong. I think, traditional methods are reasonably expensive, and especially around the maintenance. So that's something we really want to sort of do a lot more piloting on as well.
So how are you getting it down to such a low?
It's a secret.
No, it's only Nicole knows. Essentially, it is looking at those plant species that we're planting. We're using a mechanical planting method, so tractor with a little, a ripper planter that goes along and you just drop the plants in as you go. In terms of the maintenance, we're not using grass species, so we can use herbicides, so we can, instead of having to go spot spray every single one. So yeah, just some of those things. And it's sort of based on some of the work Doc has done right next door on, I think it's the old Wagbourne block that they purchased. So we're sort of learning off everyone and as they're doing stuff, and we're, I guess, pilfering off all the good bits of what they've done.
Learning around what species are
Yeah.
best, you know.
Just on that, before Nicole's last question, got here to nature-based financing pilot. So a lot of people were looking at these biodiversity credits and coming to a dead end. I assume you guys haven't on that, with probably some more resources available than individual landowners. Is that something that you could, information that you could put out there so people can follow your path in the discovery here?
Yeah, well, part of what we're doing, I think we've been, the partnership's been accepted as one of the pilots for the Ministry for the Environment. So they are sort of doing exactly what you said, Peter, following along the journey almost and reporting that back into the public domain around, you know, what were some of the roadblocks or what has worked well. And I know quite a few of the staff from ES, we had a workshop a couple of weeks ago, which sort of delved into a lot of the detail around, you know, the biodiversity credits and the mechanics of how it all works. So, but again, happy to present, you know, back to councillors on any of that sort of stuff.
That would be fantastic. I see that as something really positive. So just take Nicole's last question on this item. Thanks.
Well, actually, just following on, was on the same topic. Actually, the work we're doing with EnviroStrat is actually leading edge in New Zealand, and you know the benefits that will come out of that for the like Environment South and other agencies that have been involved in the Waituna projects. You know, it's all been about testing things and eventually the ripple effect will go out into the community. This is pretty exciting stuff, but it hasn't been done before in New Zealand. But if we can land it, and very interesting in listening to Minister Hogarth the other day, he's very keen on advancing biodiversity credits, and so this sort of thing, where all of a sudden you've got biodiversity that has a value, people are going to want to look after it and add to it. So this work takes a wee while to get off the ground, but it's pretty encouraging.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and it's promising. So look, we'll wind it up.
Jeremy's been sort of waiting.
Jeremy, sorry.
Just a quick question about the cost per hectare. And because it's always a real negative. And is that public information, how you're doing it? And the costing, and obviously the scale might have something, I just understand that. And really, it'd be really good to present that or see the information on that. Great.
Maybe. Obviously, one of the things we're trying to do is for the whole part, for all the parts, is trying to get more information out, you know, in terms of what the wider part of the trust has been up to. So, if there's anything that council would like us to present on, or in terms of the report, if there's stuff you'd like changed that better suits your needs, then obviously let us know, because you know, it's a big thing trying to be more engaging with all of you plus all the other partners.
Quite a cheer for them to charge for this.
Not charge us.
I just add though that one of the key things about the learnings that are coming through the Whakamanatira project is we're part of that, like it's ours, as well as you know, we're a key partner in the trust, and so the learnings that they're learning will need to be fed back into our programs in terms of our leading on our land, etc., etc. So just again, conscious of time, but I was just keen to make sure that the extension of an offer for the team to come along to the next workshop that we're proposing on the leading on our land, which will be in August. So Ella is going to be perfectly positioned to help drive that forward. So we'll just make sure that we're
That's a good idea.
inviting you.
I think we should do that. And look, just before you wind up, thanks very much for coming in. Kate, nice to meet you, Sarah. So look forward to seeing you more and more. It's some really interesting topics. You can probably guess the interest in the Webster block, the cost of plantings, how you can get that down, and then as Nicole's talking about the benefit around stacking some sort of credit system on top of that. So
Through you, Chair, I've got a web gift for you, so we've just produced a web brochure that explains a bit about the work of the trust and what we're doing, so I'll just leave them here and you can
That'd be
have a
great.
at your leisure and read them.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
We'll receive that report. We've got someone to move that, please. Thanks,
We
Paul.
received that report.
And Lyndall to second that. All those in favour? Aye. Yes, that's carried. Thank you very much. So our next one, we've got, we've got Rob there. So this is the Rekiura Trust update. And we've got Rob Phillips online to give us a bit of an update on that. Are you up there, Rob? Somebody?
Kia ora, Chair and councillors, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, no, that's pretty good.
Good, great. Yeah, look, this is just a quick update, and it's really seeking your endorsement to have an observer around the board of a new board that's been formed to oversee the eradication part of the project. Now, as talked previously, the project's moved into a new phase. The trust has done a chunk of its work around preparing for the eradication and done a plan to do that. And now a DOC have contracted ZIP, Zero Invasive Predators, to do that work. And they formed a company to oversee it. So it's, in my view and the view of others, there's some real value in maintaining a close connection between this new company and the council with its biosecurity responsibilities and the work it's doing around the pathway plan development. And so we think there's merit in having an observer on this, the new board, as a part of that process going forward. The trust work will continue. We're not sure exactly what that looks like at this stage, but this is a slightly different thing around saying, hey, there's value in having an observer on that on this new board. So hopefully that makes sense, and this shouldn't be totally new to you. We've talked about the work of the trust before, but this is now how do we best, if you like, position the council going forward into this next phase. Happy to take any questions, Chair and Council.
No, that's very good. Thanks for that, Rob. Just before we have some questions, Lucy might just want to clarify a few things. As an observer, what does that mean? Are we talking staff or governance?
Yeah, Rob, did you want to just for the council just provide the thinking there around whether or not it would be a governor or a staff observer that you're proposing as part of the new board?
Yeah, there's a bit of flexibility going forward on this. I'm of the view that probably would be a staff member at least initially, but there may be some scope to have, a governor there as well, just to look at in terms of succession. It is very much around the technical nature of, if you like, the biosecurity work. So it does make sense, but yeah, we can have a further discussion on that. But in my mind, it makes sense to have someone who's technically able to, to be connecting with the council's biosecurity staff that are involved in this, and to be able to brief the council, of course. So I'm seeing it really as a staff person, but there's some scope there as time moves on for that to perhaps morph into a governance role.
And I think as well, Chair, just through you, just that final sentence on the paper there talks about how this is to seek an indication from council about whether you're comfortable for us to have an observer role, and then there's a further meeting to come with the board, that first initial meeting, and we'd be able to bring back more information about what that was going to look like for the subsequent update.
Okay, we're all quite happy to progress that as a group. Okay, so well, that's very good. Anything else, Rob? Are we quite happy there?
No, that's all we wanted to seek your guidance on today, so I appreciate that.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Gary. Paul to second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks,
Good.
Rob.
Progress there.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Okay. 9.6 we move on to update and councillor requests and actions. I see we've got our wee question sheet there. We've got to grow that a bit bigger, I think.
Yeah, so
But
those
it's
two
quite
chair
small.
will come off, and the three from the front end of the agenda will
come
go
on.
in there with answers for the next meeting.
And I'd just like to say that's a really good addition. So it gives power to councillor questions through the agenda. So, right.
No action required there now, is it? You just need the resolution vote.
Yeah.
Receive the report.
Okay. Someone to thank you, Morris. Those in favour? Aye. Aye. It's carried. Thank you very much. urgent business, extraordinary business, none. And we're going to go to public excluded business, and there's always seemed to be a good reason for this. Elliot, you might just enlighten us, please.
Okay, there are two reasons today. The first one is to enable any local authority holding information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities, and to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage.
That's very good. So someone can move that we move in. Happy to do that, Mr. Chairman. Someone second that, please. Thank you, Jeremy. All those in favour? Aye. That's carried. So we'll just wait until everything's turned off. We get that confirmation as soon as we can.